I've seen shift in priority over the last year and a half is a focus on well-being and a recognition of the importance of caring for each other. I'm seeing our team members ask each other, "How are you doing?" And not in the rhetorical way it was often asked previously at work, where the expectation to answer was often pretty good. I'm seeing it being asked in an authentic way where we're truly concerned about each other and where we care about helping each other and lifting each other up. I think it's been an important wake-up call that our experiences outside the workplace are part of who we are at work too.
I can tell you that I've seen is that I believe employees have been through an audit and an edit. In essence, prioritizing things maybe differently than they had before. So as an example, mental health. I believe that our employees have in fact put a higher priority on mental health than perhaps previously. I also think that they recognize the importance of the sense of belonging to our company. And finally, I'll say, I think we all took culture somewhat for granted. And our employees, in terms of what has changed for them over the last year, is a real appreciation for a healthy, good culture like Lionbridge.
Over the last year and a half, I've seen a significant change in the way we work and live. One of the biggest challenges I'm hearing from my customers is the need to reskill, upskill, and new skill employees to achieve business objectives. Think about retailers that had to shift from brick and mortar stores to e-commerce almost overnight. This pace of change is not going away. I'm hearing leaders ask about growth and internal mobility in almost every conversation I'm in right now. When I ask them, why is this critical for you? They usually respond, well, the alternative is attrition.
We have the best jobs in the world. Together, we get to redefine success.
We're transitioning from solely using numbers to define business success to focusing on the growth, happiness, and well-being of our employees.
It's up to us to help make sure employees show up every day feeling engaged, listened to, and happy about their work.
When your employees feel valued, they thrive. And when they thrive, the business thrives.
That's why we're here.
To work together,
To redefine success as people's success.
And to thrive together.
Hello, and welcome to the 5th Annual Glint People Success Summit. My name is Archana Ramesh, and I will be your host for today's event. I am honored to be joined by so many incredibly passionate and talented people success leaders from around the world. All of you are part of a remarkable community that's helping more people be happier and more successful at work. So, if you haven't already, tell us where you're joining us from in the chat. And if you're tuning in today from the Summit microsite or YouTube, make sure to join us over here on LinkedIn Live to participate in the chat. You can find a direct link to the LinkedIn live stream just below this video screen. As a people scientist with Glint and LinkedIn, I've invested much of my career in helping organizations empower and engage employees with people-centric thinking. That means putting people at the center of everything we do, especially as we navigate an uncertain world and still find ways to thrive together. The work all of you do has an enormous impact on cultivating engagement, trust, and a sense of belonging, attributes that are crucial in a time of ongoing disruption. This year's summit is focused on providing insights, resources, and inspiration to lead your organization as we continue to adapt quickly, adopt new ways of working, and drive businesses forward. The data tells us that to succeed and thrive, we need to pay close attention to a few key themes. Number one, employee well-being, both the physical and mental health of our employees. Number two, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Number three, flexible, hybrid, and remote work, and the big changes we're seeing in workplace culture. And number four, learning, growth, and skills, particularly how people managers can support their employees for engagement and retention. I'm excited to get these conversations going over the next 90 minutes and over the next 3 days. Today, I'll first be speaking with Justin Black, the head of people science for LinkedIn and Glint. He'll be sharing his thoughts on the state of happiness at work and new insights to power people-centric change. Justin will then kick off an exciting chance for all of us to meet a true superstar. Allison Felix is the most decorated U.S. track and field Olympic athlete in history, fresh off earning her 11th medal at this past summer's Olympics. She has so much to say about persistence, hard work in pursuit of a dream, and what inspires her to be a champion on and off the track. Afterwards, Twyla Hansen, LinkedIn's Chief People Officer, will share some compelling data points about what we're seeing around talent migration and how many people are rethinking jobs and careers right now. Twyla's remarks will kick off an idea exchange with thought leaders and top executives from Microsoft, Twitter, and Dropbox on engaging and retaining talent with all the disruption we're seeing. Here's just one statistic. In a survey of more than 31,000 external global workers, Microsoft found that 41% are considering leaving their current employer this year. Then, to wrap up today, Justin will be sitting down live with Terlyn Juarez-Monroe to discuss the future of work and HR's role in helping our people and organizations thrive. But don't forget, today's just the start of 3 days of inspiring programs. Looking ahead to day 2 and 3, our sessions will be smaller and more interactive, giving you the opportunity to connect with and network with other leaders like yourselves. On Wednesday, we'll have a panel discussion with global leaders on DEI and belonging, as well as a fireside chat with a global health and well-being general manager at Delta Airlines. Then on Thursday, we'll be hosting a panel on strengthening culture in a hybrid world, followed by an interactive workshop on manager empowerment featuring speakers from Security Bank. One tip, we'll be sharing QR codes throughout these next 3 days for some special opportunities and giveaways. So keep your phones handy and grab it when those QR codes appear, like right now. If you haven't yet signed up for tomorrow's or Thursday's breakout sessions, now is your chance. This QR code will take you to our People Success Summit Hub, where you can explore the schedule, view featured speakers, and add these breakout sessions to your calendar. We have also posted the link in the chat should you not have your phones handy right now. Ready to get started with today's program? Okay, let's get going and bring in Justin Black, LinkedIn's Global Head of People Science. Welcome to the summit, Justin.
Thank you so much, Archana. I am so excited to be here today to chat with you about topics you and I are passionate about, but also things our whole people success community is passionate about.
I'm pumped too. So let's dive right in. What are you hearing about the state of happiness at work right now?
Yeah, so as I've been having conversations with executives at large global corporations and scrappy startups alike, and looking at aggregate trends in the Glint data, which spans millions of employees' engagement survey responses, I'm hearing about a challenging one-two punch. So according to the Glint data, employee happiness at work is down 3.6% in the past year. And meanwhile, burnout has risen nearly 12%. And this makes total sense. It's hard to imagine being happy at work and burnout, but it's not what we saw early in the epidemic. So what's changed? When we look into it, it looks like what employees needed in the pandemic in the early days is different from what employees need now. And this is what LinkedIn calls the Great Reshuffle. So you might have heard this term. And it's a time when many people are rethinking not just how and where they work, but why they work. And there's plenty of challenge. I know you've all experienced it as HR pros, but this is also a time when all of us gathered today as part of this people success community have an amazing opportunity, a chance to rethink how we attract, develop, engage, retain employees, and a chance to reinvent how we think about human happiness in the context of work.
Yeah, I'm struck by everything you've just mentioned, Justin, and certainly a lot of it resonates. With happiness declining, burnout rising, and the feeling that we're living through this great reshuffle, as you put it. How does this all relate to our theme for today, thriving together?
Yeah, so let's start with the idea that's central to all we do and why we're here is people success. So we talk about people success as enabling people to bring their best selves to work so they can do their best work. And if this idea means something to you, thank you. You are already a people success champion. People success is how we thrive together. It's the way I think about it. And living and working through the pandemic has meant, by necessity, to some extent, we've had to be reactive. But now we have a chance to be proactive. We can invest time, we can invest energy, we can put effort into helping our people thrive today. And in a little while, we're going to hear from Olympian Allison Felix. She uses a very simple phrase that I love, which is we have an opportunity not to ask for change, but to create change.
Wow, so well said. So, what insights do you have to help us all create change and thrive?
Yeah, since the first summit, when we aligned on this mission of shaping the path to people success, we have been continually studying what it means to bring your best self and do your best work. Also, really importantly, how to make it easy for people to bring their best and do their best. When you bring all that together, everything we've seen points to 6 elements of happiness and success that'll be salient to people at work at one point or another in their journey. The way I use this, the elements is in question form. It's the easiest way for me to remember it and use it regularly. So either I ask myself when reflecting on my own happiness and success, do I have these 6 things? Or when I'm having a people success conversation with somebody on my team, somebody like you, I ask them, do you have one of these things? And so let's go through them quickly.
Excellent. Take it away.
Cool. Thanks. The first purpose is element. The first element is purpose. And the question I would ask you is, if you were to redesign your current role to make it even more meaningful, what would you change? The importance of purpose is reflected in how many employees around the world say they're choosing jobs based not just on salaries and benefits, but also social impact and their personal beliefs. But how does that affect happiness at work? Well, here's how that shows up in the data, at least in our data. The organizations that live their culture and values are 11 times more resilient. One thing we saw really early in the pandemic was that organizations with resilient cultures responded more effectively and quickly to the changing needs of their people and customers. This is very important. The second element is growth. And here I'd ask you, what would you like to learn next? What skills would you like to develop? Employees who see good opportunities to learn and grow are 3.6 times more likely to be happy. Internal mobility is an important part of growth too, and we see that employees who change positions internally are more likely to stay. It's obvious. We see it reflected in the data. The third element is empowerment, and the question I'd ask you here is, what resources, information, or connections would allow you to work more effectively? Being trusted, not surprisingly, makes people happier, right? You should write that down. During the pandemic, we saw empowerment rise at 2 out of 3 organizations. And so what this means is that many employees have been empowered in new ways during the pandemic. And so let's not lose that as we transition to whatever it is that new normal is going to look like. The fourth element is connection. The question I ask here is, when do you feel like you can be yourself here? 94% of people say it's important for managers to promote belonging. And this is just one of many areas where direct managers play an outsized role in individual and team happiness. The fifth is clarity. I'd ask you, what are your objectives right now? And what would help you make progress on them? Employees who recommend their manager, which is a good overall indicator of manager effectiveness, are 2.3 times more likely to have clarity about their company strategy. And managers are also highly relevant in the sixth and final element. And this one is the most important one. It's well-being. Here I'd ask you, what is energizing or draining you right now? And how are you doing really? This is about compassion and care, and it's about compassion and care in service of happiness and success. We see in the data that employees who feel cared about as a person are 3.2 times more likely to be happy at work. And I think this is the most compelling data point from all the new research we've been doing. Being cared for and seen for the wholeness of our human identities simply makes us happier. It also increases people's commitment to their companies. People who feel cared about are twice as likely to want to stick around for at least 2 or more years. So there you have it, 6 elements that can help create happiness and success at work. I hope those are really useful. I would say the key to using them is to use them consistently. And we see this reflected in our data that people who have regular one-on-one meetings with their managers are more likely to say they receive effective feedback, have meaningful conversations, and get the support they need. So just do it and do it on a regular basis. Back to you, Archana.
Thank you, Justin. Those are such important words and insights, and I especially love how you use them in questions to really bring them to life. So I'd love to take a moment to hear from those tuning in today. Which of these 6 elements, purpose, growth, empowerment, clarity, connection, and well-being, is your organization focused on right now? Let us know in the chat. As we strive to help people be their fullest and best selves, we next have an opportunity to hear from someone who has a deep understanding of what it means to achieve personal best. Allison Felix probably needs no introduction. She's the most decorated track and field Olympian in US history, earning 11 Olympic medals, 7 of them gold. During this session, we ask that no photographs and screenshots be taken. It is the perfect opportunity to simply sit back and enjoy the show, just like I plan to.
Allison, thank you so much for joining us here at the People Success Summit. We're so grateful to learn from your story and your experience. We spend a lot of time talking about stats and using data to make arguments, but the things that motivate us, that we remember, that help us really change often our story. So really grateful to have you here. We're going to talk today about persistence and advocacy and working hard to achieve big goals and big dreams. But first, I want to just pause to celebrate you and your accomplishments. This summer in Tokyo at the Olympics, you won your 11th medal, which makes you the most decorated track and field Olympian in history. So many, many congratulations.
Oh, well, thank you so much. It was a really fun summer. It's been an incredible journey, and I'm really excited to be here today to talk with you and to have this conversation.
Well, let's start with that moment of winning and success. Talk about what it's like to be up on that Olympic podium.
It's pretty indescribable, being up on that podium, being full of emotions, joy, relief. It's a big celebration, and I stand up there by myself, but I honestly feel like there should be a group of people on that podium with me, because I absolutely don't accomplish anything alone. It's my coach, my strength and conditioning coach, my family, my husband, my daughter, my parents, my brother, who's my manager. It's such a team effort, and so many people, pour into me and help me to be able to even have the opportunity to run for a gold medal. So it might look like I'm on the track alone and look like, I'm getting in the blocks alone and all of that, but there is a whole support system, a whole team of people who has pushed me and helped me to get to that moment.
Allison, thank you so much. There are a couple things really resonated with me, a couple of things I wrote down. One was the emotions you expressed that resonated with you, that stuck with you. Joy, relief, celebration. So, when you have to do hard things, it's so good to remember that we're going to feel those things on the other side. The other is this phrase, like, so many people pour into me. That's great. I'm going to steal that if you don't mind. So thank you. Thank you for that. What a gift. You're not just a champion on the track. You are a champion for others. You're an advocate for others. In 2019, you wrote a New York Times column on advocacy for pregnancy and motherhood for athletes like you. Could you talk about that? Talk about how that connects with your life and your passion for that.
Yeah, it was really interesting how I got to that point to speak out. In the past, I've been an athlete who has really stayed in my lane. I've been about winning medals and running fast times and really hyper-focused on that. And it was really through my own experience of starting a family, not being supported by my sponsor, wanting to fight for others that I had seen in the same position as myself for far too long, that I came to that point. And I think what really pushed me there was, becoming a mother and having a daughter and thinking about, the world that she's going to grow up in, and not wanting her to have some of these same fights that we've been dealing with for so long. And so, I was able to find that courage to speak out and to share my truth. And although it was terrifying, there really was, freedom on the other side of that. And also, I finally saw that there's power in my voice. And the maternal policy was changed with my former sponsor. And I think a lot of times you think about speaking out or, wanting to have an impact for change, and you think that it's going to come way down the line. And here was a case where it happened relatively quickly, but only because, myself and other colleagues of mine, chose to speak out and chose to really share our own experiences and be vulnerable.
That's great. Thank you so much. I love this concept of, the change might be way down the line, but let's assume we can make it happen sooner and don't wait. You also recently appeared in television's Emmy Awards to advocate for mental health. Can you talk about your passion for that cause?
Yeah, I think right now is just a really special time in this world where we're focusing on our mental health, and we're understanding that it's part of our physical health. It's just as important as anything else. As an athlete, I think for a long time, people have kind of viewed us as invincible and almost not human, that we don't struggle with these same things that everyone else does. And I know in this past Olympics, I was so proud of some of my fellow athletes, Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka, who really brought this to the forefront and furthered this conversation. And so I know for myself, I have to prioritize my mental health. I know that I'm, in order for me to be at my best, in my home life, but also, in my professional life. And, when I'm competing, I have to take care of myself. And I think it's really neat, and it's far past time that we really shine a light on this, and that we let everyone know that, this is just a part of life, and that we do need to prioritize these things.
It's so great to hear that from such a high performer. And, the Summit community is a bunch of helpers, a bunch of HR folks and people-centric HR folks at that. And they often put themselves last. It's my observation in working with my partners in this community. So it's such a good reminder to prioritize our health.
Yeah, I think a lot of us fall into that category, taking care of everybody else. And especially, a lot of the folks who are joining us who their job is to take care of everyone else, and, falling in at the end. But we've got to say that's not okay. You have to make yourself a priority as well.
Yeah, well, and in doing so, it seems that we help people take care of themselves too, right? Instead of creating more reliance. Fantastic. Thanks so much. So I want to build on two things we've been talking about. One is mental health, and the other is something you mentioned before, which is how others pour into you, and how important collaboration is. Can you talk about inclusion and belonging in the context of running with the people that you compete with and work with and train with?
Yeah, I believe that in order to have, success and success on a very high level, it takes that deep collaboration. I talked about how I know that I accomplish nothing alone. It is absolutely a team effort, and every single person has their job. Every single person is the expert in their area. And I think we really need to have a safe space in order to reach those new heights. And so it has to be a place where it's okay to make mistakes, a place where we can challenge each other, but in a healthy sense. Because we're trying to do something, that essentially hasn't been done before. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is to have a really great environment to push each other and also allow for each other to be creative and bring our value to the table and also hear each other, know that we respect one another, and that we're all working towards the same goal. And I think that I've been on all sorts of teams and, a part of, with a lot of different dynamics. And I think that's what helps us to be successful is seeing that common goal and taking those small steps to reach it every single day.
Thank you so much. This is really well articulated. I lead a team of people scientists to advise our customers on things like this. And if you ever want a second gig and would like to join our team and explain this to our customers, yeah, absolutely. I want to just dig in a little bit on some of the hard parts of belonging, though. I think you've had experiences on both sides. Could you reflect on a moment, whether it was a time growing up or a team you were on where you didn't necessarily feel a strong sense of belonging?
Yeah, for sure. I remember one of my first Team USA relay teams, and I was only a teenager, and I was the youngest on the team, and I was on this relay with a lot of women, older women who I grew up idolizing. And it was a very intimidating situation, just the way that everyone interacted and the way that feedback was given. And it was something I was totally not used to. And I don't think it necessarily was the most healthy environment, the way that we were conducting practices and workouts and trainings. And it was a really, difficult situation. I felt almost just exactly how you said, like I didn't belong, like I was an outsider. And it made working with the team hard, and I felt like I couldn't really give my best because I was dealing with all these other circumstances. I look at the teams that I'm on now, and now I get to be that older veteran, runner who is able to lead a team. And I really make it a priority of mine to make sure that everyone feels good, make sure everyone feels heard and respected, and that I understand how people like to receive feedback. And I'm able to try to accommodate that the best that I can so that we can all give our best. But also feel really great about it, because I think working on a team, somewhat of that comfort level is good to be able to have that chemistry. And so I always go back to kind of that difficult experience that I had so that I can say like, okay, I want to do things different. I want to help those younger athletes as they come up and as they find their way on the team so that they can thrive, because at the end, that makes the team stronger, and that's what we all want.
I love the reminder to take the time to understand how people like to receive feedback. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's in some ways it sort of removes some of the stress around it. Like sometimes it's hard to give feedback, but if you've already asked somebody how they like to give feedback, in some ways you have kind of implicit permission to go ahead and continue to do it. And so that's a great reminder. I'm going to keep that tip. Thanks. Okay, one part of your story I love as an entrepreneur and a former startup person is your entrepreneurial work in footwear. And you got to wear shoes you designed when you ran in the Olympics. Talk about this part of your life, what it means to you and what it meant to wear your own shoes when you were running the Olympics.
Yeah, this has been such an incredible part of my journey right now. Myself and my brother, we created a lifestyle brand for women called Sage, and it really came into existence out of necessity. I talked about, that fight that I had for maternal protections and contracts, and I parted ways with Nike after that situation. And I didn't have shoes to wear in the Olympics. And so we were like, what if we did this ourselves? And it seemed like this massive thing and crazy and overwhelming. But the more I sat with it, I was like, wow, here's an opportunity to not ask for change, but to create change. And so our first product is a lifestyle sneaker for women, and it's engineered, designed by women for women. And I'm just so passionate about it, so excited about it. And just the amazing thing was to be able to go to the Olympics to win a gold and a bronze medal, in a shoe that my brand created. It just felt incredible. I felt like I had previously been told that, my story was over and I had no more to offer. I had no more value. And so to be able to say, no, I know what I have to offer. I know what I bring to the table. I know I'm not done yet. And then to create this brand and to be able to get it all done, it was so satisfying. And now I'm so excited to continue to building this community through Sage and furthering bringing this product to women.
Congratulations on that success too. I love this line. I'm going to put this post-it on my computer screen too. You have an opportunity not to ask for change, but to create change. That's great. Thank you for that. Let's talk about the theme for this year's People Success Summit, which is thriving together. What do you do that helps you thrive, whether it's wearing comfy shoes or something else?
I think one of the biggest things is taking care of myself. And I saw that more than ever the past couple years. I think we've all obviously had such a difficult time with the pandemic. And the last couple years have just felt so heavy, and I think by leaning on my support system, and I'm a person who it's kind of hard for me to ask for help, and I've really had to lean into that and to say, I don't feel okay. Like I need to take space and take time for myself, and I need a bit of extra help. And I think that has really allowed me to be able to do better. I think, making sure I'm getting my sleep and my rest. One thing I did during the pandemic was start a gratitude journal, and it totally shifted my perspective. I think there was so much going on in the world. It's just so heavy that starting my day off with really focusing in on starting out with a positive mindset, and there is so much to be grateful for, that it really just changed things for me. So just doing some things that even seem small, whether that's coming home from my day and just sitting in my car for 10 minutes and before I go into the house and the chaos of, everyone pulling on me and needing things, just kind of centering myself, maybe a little bit of meditation. But I think it comes down to making sure that I'm taking care of myself.
Well, thanks, Allison. Thanks so much. What a great reminder. And yeah, just a reminder to be so much to be grateful for. So many things that you've shared with us today that just motivational and helpful and so authentic, and I really appreciate it. I think it's just going to be such a boost to our summit community. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, and I really enjoyed talking about these topics with you.
Thank you for a great discussion, and you'll be glad to know that I'm wearing comfortable shoes. They're slippers, which I think is the new sort of classic home comfortable shoe. So I think we're in good company here. I am excited now to pass it over to LinkedIn's Chief People Officer, Twila Hansen, who's going to run us over a few details of the next session.
Thank you so much, and hello everyone. I'm so excited to be here today. The current talent migration is bigger than anything we've seen before. As mentioned earlier, in a survey of more than 31,000 external global workers, Microsoft found that 41% are considering leaving their current employer this year. And we've seen this play out in LinkedIn data as well, with the share of job changes increasing over 40% year over year globally over the past few months. This widespread movement of talent is part of what we call the Great Reshuffle, an unprecedented moment in the history of work where all of us are rethinking not just how we work, but why we work. Organizations across the globe are searching for ways to engage and retain their employees, and we as HR leaders are uniquely positioned to strategically navigate this future. There is a need for HR to help organizations drive change, deeply understand employee sentiment, and question long-held assumptions, systems, and processes by embracing new ideas and creating new norms. So in the face of transformation, let's take hold of this opportunity to enact bold and innovative changes that will not only position our organizations for success, but will also help our people thrive. I'm so excited that we now get to hear from 3 companies today who are on the forefront of this work. I hope you enjoy our next panel, The Great Reshuffle, the secrets to engaging and retaining top talent.
Thank you, Twyla, for that engaging overview of the Great Reshuffle. It's clearly an exceptional time for the world of work. If we think about how employees are shifting their perspective on why they work, how do we ensure that we give people what they want and what they need in their experience at work? I am so grateful not to have to answer that question alone, so please join me in welcoming a panel of experts on this topic. We'll start with Joe Whittinghill, who's the Corporate Vice President of Talent, Learning, and Insights at Microsoft. We're also joined by Danny Guillory, who's the Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer at Dropbox. And we're joined by Jennifer Christie, who's the Chief People Officer at Twitter. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you all so much for bringing your insights to this important topic. Let's dive right in. We have your expertise and it's valuable. I want to start with some recent research out of Glint's latest employee well-being report, which showed that most employees don't actually believe that their organizations are a place where they can grow internally. If you look at the data, we have 1 in 5 people who say that they can't necessarily grow their careers internally, that their managers wouldn't be supportive of that, and that their organizations wouldn't be supportive of that. That's a pretty big opportunity that we have. And if you combine that with the data that we see on the drivers of what makes a great culture in our latest cross-company global research, the number 1 driver for the first time, I've been looking at this data for 20 years, for the first time since I've been looking at it, the number 1 driver is a perception of learning and growth. So if we look at this, 2 data points together, we have huge demand for employees for learning and growth, and at the same time, an opportunity to improve in that area. So Joe, I want to get your perspective on this. How can we truly create a culture of learning and growth at our organizations?
Yeah, this has been, the challenge of organizations for decades of what does a learning culture really look like. And I think that part of what the digital age is bringing and then the pandemic is brought to us is more and more employees asking that question of, can I fulfill my purpose and at my place of work, and how can I learn and grow? And that statistic you shared is sobering for sure, especially when all of us are looking to have employees stay with our organizations versus go pursue other places. And we've been on a journey, as you know, using the concept of growth mindset, which is all about being what our CEO referred to as learn-it-alls versus know-it-alls. And that was a major shock for all of us that we needed to switch over, and one just to name the fact that we probably had some behaviors we needed to change. But as that started to happen, this focus on continuous learning, continuous self-learning, and team learning has been great. And then the last thing I'll just add is we are going to double down very heavily on career and really asking our managers to have a focused conversation at least once a year, if not more, with each of their employees, instigated by the employee when the employee wants to have that conversation about what is their development plan, which we think is short term, and then what is their long-term career plan.
Thanks, Joe. I wrote down a couple of things I'm going to take with me. One, just to emphasize the learn it all mindset, something I've been just grateful to be exposed to. It works for all performers. Even high performers are trained to think that they have to be know-it-alls in many situations, and to shift that, I think, is really helpful. I also love what you said about sort of empowering the employee to trigger the conversation in a time and in a way that's right for them. Thank you so much. Jennifer, as we think about this problem, internal mobility is an obvious way to ensure that people feel a sense of growth in the organization. Can you talk about how to focus on upskilling and reskilling in today's world of work, and what you're doing at Twitter.
Sure. Thank you. A few years ago, we decided to go beyond just kind of the internal mobility that you would find in your own team. So whether it's promotion or, a lateral move within your own organization, which we have at Twitter, and we enable that for sure. But we recognized that we had a lot of folks who are earlier in their careers who were still kicking the tires on different kinds of roles and careers that they wanted to have. And so they may have been hired into a marketing function or a product function and have found, during cross-functional work or just meeting other colleagues that they wanted to try something completely different. And we have a process at Twitter that we call branching out. We have a lot of bird type tree analogies at Twitter, but it's called branching out. And it's if you really want to really try something different. And you raise your hand and you look for opportunities in a completely other org. And we position you with projects, or we position you with certain types of learning so you can start to understand and start to learn what that shift might look like. And so you're ready for it when a role opens up. So it's something where we've had people come into the people team for marketing. We've had people leave the people team and go to product orgs. And we talk about this during our orientation and when we're recruiting candidates. And people have found it really exciting to say, like, yeah, I can get hired at Twitter for a certain role, but I might end up in an entirely other organization and career path. And I think it's what people are looking for, being able to kind of navigate their careers, and not just an upward and across way, but really looking entirely differently and reimagining their careers.
Thanks for that, Jennifer. I love this concept of branching out. It's such a nice way to make it approachable. I want to build on this. So I said the top driver in our latest research of great cultures was perception that I can learn and grow in my career. The number 2 driver, and this is the first time it's made the top 5 in a little while, is belonging. And I want to dig in on this because I think in many ways growth and belonging are connected, right? I feel a sense of learning and growth in my organization, and it's a place where I feel valued, involved, and heard. I think it also calls on us, if you think about how we define how people talk about belonging, how employees operationalize it in the comments that they leave on surveys, for example, it causes us to reframe how we think about it and how we talk about it. So instead of thinking about count and classify approaches to diversity, equity, and inclusion, we are now focused on how do we create a place where everyone can bring their best self to work and do their best work. So Danny, this is a great topic for us to turn to you on. How are you thinking about creating a culture where inclusion and belonging is the core, not necessarily count and classify, and yet how do you measure success when inclusion is the focus?
So the first thing I'd like to say is that I don't think we should dismiss count and classify to start with, because as long as we are not representative of the people who live in the United States, I think we have a responsibility to address those structural inequities. So it's an and for me, not an or. I wouldn't dismiss it until we have true equality in our organizations. That said, there are a number of things that I think we can do. So at Dropbox, what we've done is to try to simplify diversity and inclusion by running a campaign that's called I Am Committed. And we have 3 major commitments that we ask of people. 1 is to hire a diverse team. 2 is to advance and develop people equitably. And 3 is to engage in personal growth. And we go at it both from the perspective of somebody who's a manager, as well as somebody who's an individual contributor, because even as an individual contributor, I have an ability to influence each one of these. And we have measurables that relate to all of these, in addition to behaviors that we expect from people. The second thing that I'd add is that in a virtual first environment, because as a company, I know we're going to talk about this more as we go on, but as a company, we've decided to really commit to virtual first. And in being a virtual first company, one of the things that we realized was the outsized importance of the manager, because the manager is now the center of my strong tie network. And so I experience that group a lot more. So we have tried to focus a lot on the development of our managers. We're starting to run quarterly manager summits for them. And we've also started to run a whole manager effectiveness campaign to dig down past our survey information to see where are they doing well and where could they potentially use support, and look to see how we can supplement the things that we're already doing to ensure that they can do their best work. Because now more than ever, my manager is equated with my experience in an organization.
I appreciate the lead-in to the topic of flexibility in virtual work environments, and sort of virtual first environments, I think is the phrase you used, which I really like. So let's pivot to that aspect of the conversation. This is top of mind with every executive I speak with right now. Jennifer, this is not a new issue for Twitter. This is something that you've been focused on as an organization for quite a while, and you were one of the first organizations to go kind of remote first and lead with that. I think it was May of 2020. So could you share with us, first of all, how COVID kind of accelerated the plans you already had, but also why flexibility is so important for you all at Twitter, and why you think flexibility should be an important part of every organization's strategy?
Yeah, sure. So really back in 2018, we launched a workforce and workplace strategy that was anchored on flexibility. And not just flexibility about working from home or working from an office, but also about geographic flexibility. And a lot of it was tied to our talent strategies, and a lot of it was tied to what we were hearing from our own employees. They wanted to stay at Twitter, but they needed to move to a different location. They wanted to stay at Twitter, or they wanted more opportunities to work from home. And so we started driving more of that change and more flexibility throughout our organization. So by the time COVID hit, we were really ready to pivot to a fully remote workforce. Coming out of this, however, as we emerge, we will be more of a hybrid workforce. Again, we're putting the flexibility and the choice in our employees' hands, so they can choose to work how they want to work. If they want to come in all the time, they can. If they never want to come in, they don't have to. If they want to split their time, that's fine too. But what we have found, and it goes back actually a little bit to the previous discussion around internal mobility in a different way, allowing your employees to move around and live in different locations, but keep the same job they have. That's actually been a huge bonus for people at Twitter that didn't love the job they had, but didn't want to try to have to find a new job if they went to a different location. So we doubled down on both flexibility in terms of where you work every day, but also geographic mobility in terms of where you're able to work. So we give that choice to our people and are opening up more and more locations for people to work from across the globe. And that's really helped us retain and attract talent from lots of different locations.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Danny, I want to come back to you because I think Jennifer hit on it, you hit on it, this connection between a hybrid workforce and diversity, inclusion, and equity. Could you talk about the intersection of helping everybody bring their best self to work in a hybrid work environment?
Absolutely. And for us, the term we use is virtual first. And what that means in our case is we'll do the majority of our work from our remote locations, but we'll use the spaces that we have for collaboration. We saw this as an opportunity to really level the playing field in terms of the experiences people were having. So the challenge sometimes with a hybrid workplace is that if I happen to be one who lives next to the office and goes all the time, whereas somebody else might be in Montana who's remote all the time, there tends to be a class distinction that starts to occur. Sometimes we've all been on calls where we all talked in the room and then got to the end of the call and finally said, oh, by the way, does anybody on the phone have any comments? Well, in a virtual first environment, the playing field is leveled for everyone. So that was something that was a real value for us and really important to us. The second thing that this approach has done for us is that it's opened up our markets, because now we hire in most states in the United States. And what that's done is it's increased dramatically the diversity that we can draw from in terms of our candidate pools. So we've seen it pretty dramatically already on most sides of the business. The one place where I think we still have some work to do, as do most organizations, is on the tech side of the business, the engineering side, because there still tends to be, I think, a bias that a number of us may have to hire people from traditional FANG companies. But again, with this broadened and more expansive candidate pool, I'm really excited for what we can do around diversity. So two things. One I'd mention is that it's really leveled the playing field for the employees that we do have. And secondly, it's opened the aperture for us in terms of the candidates that we can bring in. So I'm really excited for Virtual First and what it's doing for our organization.
Thanks, Danny. I love this. I love this, just the pivot to, yeah, there are some challenges, but really it's an opportunity to engage people in a different way. Thank you for that. Another thing I'm hearing in this, and Joe, I'd love to get your insight on this, given the complexity, the size of Microsoft. One thing I'm hearing is, while there are some general principles we all seem to agree on, there are going to be different approaches that work for different teams and different organizations. Joe, could you give us some advice on how to figure out what the best approach is for each organization as we think about owning individual organizations?
Yeah, I think one of the ahas that everyone had as we were going through this is you really have to look at the roles and determine which roles are going to be most advantageous for different types of work, and then what roles just require someone to be on site. So in tech, for example, data centers. Our data center technicians and engineers really do need to be in amongst the equipment. Or, I can give you many examples of where we're doing design, whether it's in gaming or other parts of the organization, say in Silicon, where because of the physical nature of the work, it doesn't really lend itself to hybrid all the time, but there are occasions for some of it. So one tip is look at the type of work that you're doing and get clear on what you are going to be able to allow to have different work styles, but then be very careful about the earlier topic on equity. So we do want to make sure it's fair and equitable across all of the jobs in the company. And you're right, we operate in 190 countries. And so keeping track of all of that and making sure that we are ensuring a great employee experience on all those permutations gets pretty curious. The second thing is, and it builds off of something Jennifer said, we found a third aspect that seems relatively straightforward, but we declared it. In addition to site, which is the office, location, the geographic area, we found that hours, and really being clear that work hours is one that people who are caregivers, whether they're parents or caring for elderly, parents or what have you, that just making it okay that you can come into the office at different times versus it being a set schedule has maybe been the biggest winner for us. And then the last one is to consider where you're going to empower. We made a decision that was very different than even some of our subsidiaries did and some of our colleagues did, which is we empowered all the way down to the team manager level. So we have 22,000 managers in the company, which is amazing, which means 22,000 teams. And we said, we would like you to work with your team and figure out what's going to work best with all of you. And of course, you're going to have to clear it with your upper management. But we wanted those closest to the work making those decisions. And we think that's really been a good decision for us thus far.
These are great reminders for our Summit community who are trying to solve these problems every day. I want to pivot a little bit as we start to close and just reflect on the fact that it's clear that growth and inclusion and flexibility are going to be key to us giving people what they want and need from work. I think ultimately, reflected in your responses though too, is this thread of trust and empathy. And that requires dialogue. It's reflected in your responses, getting feedback from employees and responding to it, empowering teams to talk about what they need and respond to those needs on a local level. I'd love to get your perspective on this, in particular on the dialogue aspect. How can organizations drive a stronger relationship now and in the future with their employees and better understand what matters to them? So Joe, let's start with you. We'll just keep the mic on you for this one.
We believe that the way you're going to have productive, inclusive, and connected teams is really to work with your managers to make that happen. And we found during the pandemic that by greatly increasing their one-on-one communication and the amount of time they were spending in team conversations, so to your point, dialogue was a game changer for us. And it made the employees themselves and the managers feel more connected to each other, but also to their work and the company. And this was both for at home and at work. And we luckily had just released our manager model, which is we ask our managers to model, coach, and care. And so we said, focus in on care during this time and really make sure you're connecting with those employees and listening to what they need to be productive, as I said, but then also just as humans. What is it that is going to allow them to be engaged? And that in and of itself caused our trust scores to go up on all of our employee listening systems. So there's something there and more to come.
Wow. Seeing an increase in the trust score. I mean, just what we know about the impact of trust on everything else we measure and we care about on the people side of the business. What a great sign. Danny, how are you thinking about this at Dropbox, the future of stronger relationships with employees through dialogue?
Sure. So there are two dimensions, I think, to the question you asked. The first is how you listen. And the biggest thing that we've learned at Dropbox over the past year is that we have to listen in a variety of ways. So we do our engagement survey twice a year, but we also do a number of different ways to hear from employees. So in addition to that, we run sometimes third-party focus groups where we have a neutral third party come in and run focus groups with different subgroups within the organization. We run a number of executive coffee chats that are more intimate. So executives usually with about 10 to 12 people in a facilitated discussion. We run sometimes focus groups or listening sessions with full employee resource groups. And the other thing that we're starting to do now is use some of our upward feedback and performance discussions and feedback on those discussions as other ways to find out things. The biggest lesson I've taken from the past year is that we need to look at things in a variety of different dimensions to get a full picture and to get the texture of the picture. I think the second thing that you mentioned is kind of how do you build, is around how do you build that trust. And one of the things that we started to do when we announced that we would be virtual first last year is we realized that community and culture are going to be essential to maintaining the connectedness that we have. And so we've started to run a number of different channels for people to continue to grow their network of weak ties. Because we know and understand that my happiness at work, information flow, and my ability to move across the organization are all dependent upon my weak ties. And so having people understand that it's a new muscle to exercise, I can't just run into people anymore in the cafeteria or in the hallway. I need to proactively participate in some of these different channels, whether they be social events, whether they're more community-oriented events, whether they're company strategy events, where I can create those strong ties and create that sense of community. So listening from a variety of different dimensions and helping people understand how to build up their community of weak ties, I think, are keys for us to respond to your question.
Wow, thanks, Danny. That's really helpful. I love this idea of continuing to seek feedback through multiple modes. We're seeing this reflected in our usage data too. Okay, Jennifer, off to you. Share with us how you're thinking about building stronger relationships through dialogue at Twitter.
Yes, so first I'll just say a +1 to what Joe and +1 to what Danny said. Managers on the front lines mean everything, and their ability to connect with their employees and know what's going on is key. And also having channels that are opened up to be able to hear and pass information is important. I guess I'll just add maybe more at a micro level what we're doing, what I also think is important on top of both of those things is around transparency. And that's something that we've really leaned into at Twitter. And we have an amazing people analytics team. And we have found, particularly in tech, people want access to the data. They want to hear the insights, but they want to look at the data themselves. And so we've created diversity dashboards that every employee can click into and look at what our diversity metrics are across the board at any manager, any leader. And we found that, just reporting out our top line numbers wasn't resonating with everybody. They're like, that doesn't seem like my experience. That doesn't seem like my team. And so we said, well, let's show you what your team is. And so across the board, we're leaning into transparency, which I definitely think builds trust. And then the other thing that we're also leaning into is around psychological safety. Because if you have channels, but people feel like there might be repercussions for speaking up or challenging the status quo or providing feedback upwards, then they're not going to use those channels in the way that's going to be the most useful. So we've really leaned into psychological safety training with all of our managers and all of our employees top down. And that's something that we're continuing to roll out. But we feel like psychological safety is really a foundational piece for everyone feeling like they can do their best work and being able to have a really strong voice at work in terms of what matters to them.
What a fabulous way to close us out, Jennifer, with a focus on empowering people with data and transparency and focusing on trust and psychological safety. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone on the panel for your perspective. I'm left with a more positive feeling than I started this conversation. I think I started this conversation feeling like there's so much challenge in the Great Reshuffle. And thanks to your leadership, what you've already tried and what you shared with us, I actually feel like there's more opportunity in this for us to accelerate the kind of human-centric approaches to leadership that we want to see in organizations through the Great Reshuffle. So thank you for leaving me feeling more positive at the end. I'm sure our community will feel the same way. And thank you again for a great discussion.
Thank you, Justin. What inspiring content so far. What has really stuck out to me is this statistic that has been mentioned a few times already. Microsoft found that 41% of people are considering leaving their current employer this year. When coupling that with this great reshuffle movement, it is very clear that what employees look for from their employers is quite different from pre-pandemic times. As a result, we really need to adjust our mindset around employee engagement and experience to ensure we're meeting our people where they are and lead with trust, empathy, and transparency, as we so eloquently heard from our panelists just now. Before I introduce our next session, I did want to tease that we do have a few special giveaways and surprises for everyone at the end of today's program, so make sure to stick around. Now, let's look towards the future. I would like to welcome back Justin as he sits down to discuss HR predictions for 2022 and beyond, which I can't believe we're talking about 2022, but he's going to have that conversation with Chief People Officer Terlyn Juarez Monroe. So back to you, Justin.
Thank you, Archana. I'm so excited to kick off our final fireside chat for today and welcome Terlyn Juarez Monroe. Terlyn's career as an HR change agent has spanned over 25 years. She's worked in both B2B and B2C companies, worked in multiple industries. Most recently, she was the Chief People Officer and SVP People and Places at Varian Medical Systems. She's now an advisor to nonprofits and a startup, and she currently sits on the board of Cancer CarePoint. Welcome, Terlyn. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Justin. Great to be here.
All right, let's jump right in. This year's summit theme is Thriving Together, and it immediately evokes thoughts about well-being for me. I think one of the silver linings for me through the pandemic has been the elevated importance of well-being, something people like us talk about a lot, but also the expanding definition of it to be more inclusive of things like physical, emotional, financial, social, et cetera, facets. So you look at that against some of the data we've been talking about today, right? Employees who feel cared about as a person are 3.2 times more likely to be happy. My first question for you is a basic one. What should HR teams today focus on when they redesign their well-being programs for the future?
Well, first of all, I'm so glad we're talking about well-being, and I'm so glad that well-being is top of mind as we start to look at our benefits offerings in every company. What's interesting is during the pandemic, we all realized that well-being was critical. It was front and center, not only for companies, but for each of us as individuals. And now, as we look at being into the pandemic for about 18 months or so, we have seen companies introduce meditation apps like Headspace and Calm. We have seen, and this also happened pre-pandemic, but wellness dollars for things like memberships and even massages. But what we also saw during the pandemic were some new offerings, free offerings, because not everything has to cost money, but companies working with their EAP partners to bring in sessions around anxiety and depression. Those are benefits that were tied to the unmet needs of employees. And I think more and more as employers, we realized we needed to really understand what were those needs of employees and how did they differ from group to group. So as we go forward, as we think about benefits, it's going to extend well beyond just medical and dental. And I love the fact that it really is going into more of well-being offerings. The other thing we really need to keep in mind is that we have to think about the different personas in our workforce. The new college grad, someone getting ready to retire, the working parent. So as we think about that, what's critical is we have to listen to voice of employee, and we have to tie our well-being strategy and our offerings to that voice in our communication and reinforce it throughout the year so that people know we're listening to them and we care.
I really like this focus on the individual, Terlyn. It's sort of like for people like us, like it's obvious, like we know it's important, but can you just state, like, why is it important that we focus on the individual?
It's so critical. Years ago, I had an opportunity to work with a psychologist, and we did some research around the end-to-end employee experience and the moments that matter during that experience. One of the moments that matters is times of change and times of a crisis. And when we did some research, we found out that employees asked two questions during that time. The first one is, do you care about me? And the second one is, do you care about my role? What we choose to do and not do for well being delivers a message that answers that first question in our employees' minds. And that is why our benefits programs need to go well beyond medical and dental and really extend into non medical care, education, and offerings that focus in on the broader definition of well being, those things that people care about today and that are important to all of us today: emotional, physical, financial, etc.
You know, when you redefine well-being this way, it's starting to make me think about the connection between well-being and inclusion. So can we go there a little bit? So I think, why do you think now it's more important to focus on investing in everyone versus just focusing our investments on a few high potential leaders?
I think it's such a great question. During the pandemic, we saw people rise to the occasion, and we saw people at all levels rise to the occasion. It wasn't just people who had manager in their title who were jumping in to support customers, to support one another in the workplace. We saw people at all levels. Talent is everywhere. And I think it's really important in this day and age that we look at leadership development as an opportunity for everyone. And we challenge ourselves, how do we extend leadership development throughout every role in the company? So it's not just, as you were mentioning, for those high potential folks, because we never know who might that next CEO be, or we may never know who is actually going to be rising to the occasion when others are freezing because they're saying, oh my goodness, we're not sure what to do. I think it's critical that we look at leadership development in some new ways. And it's just looking at leadership development from a mindset, skills, capabilities perspective. Long gone are those days where we fly everyone into corporate, where we need to really say, okay, we're going to teach you everything you need to know in 1 week. We're going to send you back. Right now, learning really has to be about people taking advantage of those experiences that are offered to them, but also that it's about people looking everywhere to learn and having that really joint accountability, joint responsibility between a company and also an employee.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just about to say, it sounds like you're talking about an accountability and responsibility model. I would love for you to stay on that topic. It's so helpful as we think about executing things, things like this, to have one of those. How do we think about accountability and responsibility here?
Absolutely. So as individuals, it's important that we all look around. There's so much information. I mean, there's a podcast on everything nowadays. There's YouTube videos, TED Talks. There's incredible books like Think Again by Adam Grant, or Start With Why by Simon Sinek, or Team of Teams by General Stanley McChrystal. I mean, there's so many books. They go on and on and on. Podcasts like Brene Brown's Power of Vulnerability, that challenges all of us to think differently. What are we doing as individuals to really seek out those learning opportunities that we can experience on our own, where someone isn't telling us, you should really read this or look at this. I think it's also important that we as individuals in a company, we're also staying on top of what's going on in the macroeconomic environment, workplace trends. And really, if we work for global companies, what's happening in those other countries where we're doing business? As companies, we need to make learning relevant. So that's the other part of the equation. We need to deliver learning at the point of need in bite-sized chunks, continuous learning integrated into our business life cycle, into our talent processes, and throughout the end-to-end experience. I also feel like to be able to do this at scale, we have to create leader teachers at every level. So if we think about it, our leaders are the best teachers because they can put things in context. They can connect it to the work that they and their teams do. And that's really powerful.
I love that phrase. So leader teachers at every level, I think is what you said. I didn't have a chance to write it down, but hopefully it's recorded. I want to stay on that because, I think it relates to culture too. And a lot of execs, I'm sure you've been talking to, are talking about culture and how to change culture or reinforce their culture. give us some advice on how to prepare our cultures for the near and long-term future.
Oh my goodness. I've spoken to several CEOs over the last several months, and it's interesting because many will ask, how do we keep our culture? How do we not lose that pre-pandemic culture that was so special? That was the magic of our company. And I love what you were mentioning, and you've mentioned it before, which is how can we continue to evolve our culture? A culture like a business strategy, like your customer needs, they have to continue to evolve to ensure they're relevant. There's a great model where if you think about a triangle, at the top of the triangle, at the point of the triangle, imagine your vision, your strategy. One point is culture, and the other point is leadership. We already talked about the importance of leadership at all levels. What we have to do is now really tap into culture, and we have to start by defining culture. What do we mean by culture? Vision is a critical piece of it. It's really the jumping off point, but there's other elements of culture, such as values, that we need to revisit, and we need to ask ourselves, in the context of where we are today, what still resonates about our culture? And what's that magic that we do want to carry forward, because it's accretive to our go forward goals and vision? And at the same time, what needs to evolve? What needs to be changing today because of where we are, what's happening around us, and what our employees need and what the company needs?
Do you think, I might be putting words in your mouth, but are you saying that visions are more important now than ever, or as important as it ever has been in sort of the history of strategizing?
And inspiring visions. They have to be inspiring, Justin. We need to re-look at our vision statements and say, do they inspire? Do they create that emotional connection to people? I think that's absolutely critical.
How do we know? How do we know if we're creating an emotional connection to people?
Yeah, it's interesting. When we have employees talk about our vision, can they recite our vision statements? And is that creating an emotional connection with them? Does it resonate? This era of, and I love it, you're calling it the Great Reshuffle. We've also heard the Great Resignation, the Great Migration, the Great Calibration. I'm not sure where we're all going to land in terms of this era, but more and more employees today are taking a step back, as we heard in the last couple of sessions, and asking themselves, do I like working here? Do I feel connected to the company? Do I like what I'm doing? Do I like the people I'm working with? They're starting to ask all these questions. If we have an inspiring vision, that makes a huge difference. The company where I was just at, Varian, our vision was very simple, and it resonated with every employee. It was a world without fear of cancer. If you think about it, that is what woke us up every morning. That's why we wanted to go and do things that were above and beyond, because we so believed in that vision. That's also how our values and everything that we did in the company aligned. That triangle again between the vision, the culture, and leadership. We had that alignment, and that inspiring vision helped to drive that alignment.
Boy, if ever there were a time for our field to have an impact, right now is it. And I think that's been true, right? I mean, I'm sure you've seen it, over the past year and a half. The role of HR has certainly been elevated even more than it had been just before that. Advice for our group here: how do we in HR continue to have an elevated impact in the C-suite?
It's interesting. I think now's the time for HR to rebrand HR. And as we think about our brand, who we are, what we do, what makes us special, how we show up and continue to show up, this has been a game-changing year for HR. And we are at this point of where folks are looking to our organizations to say, help us look at our culture, help us architect our culture of the future. And really, when we think about HR, if we think about HR as a business, we're in the people business. And we deliver products, services, and offerings that are in service to meeting the needs of our customers, which, when you think about it, HR does have customers. We haven't always thought about it that way. But imagine if we thought really about HR as a business, and we put on our business leader hat, where we're business leaders first. with deep HR expertise, and we turn around and we think about our products, services, and offerings in that way as well.
I like this. I want to stay here because it's a topic I love, because it's an entrepreneurial aspect, right, to HR. How do we treat, to say more about how do we treat tactically HR like a business and like a product?
Yeah. If you think about it, we have employees, customers, and investors, just like a company. Our employees are HR team members, and we really need to care about their experience. We talk about burnout and we talk about what's going on with the pandemic. Our HR team members were working 24/7, and many still are on so many things. And we continue to push out products and services and offerings for our customers. Our customers are candidates and employees and alumni even. And they have needs and expectations regarding what we deliver. Our investors are execs and our CFOs who are funding our offerings and services, and they're expecting an ROI, which means that we need to measure things.
So well summarized. Thank you. I wrote down a few things I'm going to take with me. There's one last question I have on behalf of our community here. So much focus on skills and upskilling right now. What's your advice for HR? What are the skills that HR leaders are going to need into the future?
There's so many. We've heard about so many of them before, but I'm going to start with one we don't talk about too often, and that's business acumen. It's critical that we are well informed as to what's going on in the business. We're reading annual reports, we're listening to earnings calls, we're reading press releases, but also we're in tune with what's important to our leaders. Brad Smith, former CEO of Intuit, when I was there years ago, always asked 3 simple questions that stuck with me, and I ask leaders this all the time. 1, what's important? What's important to our employees, customers, and investors? 2, how are we doing against that question, against those expectations and needs? 3, what are the priorities to improve, and having rigorous prioritization? These aren't always specific to culture and talent, but you can hear what's on leaders' minds, what's keeping them up at night. We start to then really have empathy for what's going on in the business so that we know how to deliver offerings and solutions that are not only meeting the needs of the business, but at the same time meeting the needs of our customers, our employees, and we bring those 2 things together. And that's really critical. That's what people need from us today. That's what's so special about HR is we draw those connections when maybe others haven't.
That's so good. And I'm so glad you mentioned Brad Smith from Intuit. I mean, what a great model of a people-centric leader and someone from whom I learned the importance of not just satisfying customers, but trying to delight them and creating an emotional experience. And that's what sort of you evoked for me here. Amazing. Thank you so much, Terilyn. What a gift. It's been just an amazing discussion to have with you. Really appreciate you joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it, Justin.
Well, it's been a whirlwind, hour and a half, and I have pages of notes that I'll be taking away from today. Let me quickly recap a couple of highlights from today. First, to say again, I love the quote from Allison Felix. Here's an opportunity not to ask for change, but to create change. There is so much opportunity right now to shift organizational strategies to be more people-centric, and we should not be afraid to create that change at our organizations today. To help create that change, retain our talent, and foster more happiness and success at work, the second really big thing I wrote down was about needing to listen to our people and drill into what matters to them most right now. This is a reminder of something that we do as a regular practice. The third thing that stood out is this idea of leading with empathy, trust, and transparency, and how that'll be key to gaining buy-in across the organization at all levels on any organizational change or strategy we're doing. And the fourth thing I wrote down was what we just discussed with Terilyn, was about how people-centric leadership will be imperative for all organizations moving forward as we focus increasingly on caring for employees' whole selves as opposed to just their work selves. It won't just be a nice to have among special leaders. I want to bring Archana back now to get her thoughts and help close us out. Back to you, Archana.
Thank you, Justin. A huge +1 to all the things that you just mentioned. They were certainly resonating for me as well. One topic that really resonated with me as well was that the future of our workplaces is flexible. And this provides us with a unique opportunity to be much more intentional about creating equity and inclusion in our workplaces in new and innovative ways than we might have in the past. I'd love to take a moment to hear from you, the audience. What was your biggest takeaway from today? Please do let us know in the chat. It is exciting to know that this is just the start of 3 days of amazing content. I am sure I will have a notebook full of tips and tricks by Thursday. So to help you capture all of these key takeaways throughout the next 2 days, we've created a worksheet that should help. And as an added bonus, we have already included the top takeaways we just talked about here today. Well, that concludes the first day of the 2021 People Success Summit. Before you go, we did want to impart a few gifts upon those who are still tuning in. The first is that I'm excited to announce that we will be giving away a pair of comfortable shoes signed by Allison Phoenix from her signature footwear brand called Seish. Be sure to tune in tomorrow and Thursday during the breakouts for a chance to win. Additionally, while I can't give too much away yet, there will be an additional surprise unveiled over the next 2 days. You don't want to miss it. Secondly, since the People Success Summit's inception back in 2017, we have been gifting all those in attendance a challenge coin. And if we were in person this year, I may have called a coin check to see who brought theirs with them. You can claim the 2021 coin now, along with another small gift now while supplies last. This coin signifies that you are part of a larger community of passionate, people-driven HR leaders who will be your advisors, cheerleaders, and sounding boards when you encounter a roadblock. It also serves as a reminder to maintain momentum and take advantage of opportunities to expand people success approaches at your organizations today. This is a journey that we are all on together. And to help you on this journey, we want your feedback. We here at Glint and LinkedIn are huge advocates for using feedback to develop. So right now, we want to hear from you. Please share your feedback on today's event by completing a short survey, which will be shared on the screen and in the event chat. Again, I hope you enjoyed the sessions today. I know I did. Thank you to all of our speakers, especially Justin Black, my manager, someone who lives people success day in and day out, for leading all of today's amazing sessions. And thank you to all of you who are joining us from around the world today. I hope you walk away feeling inspired and ready to lead the future of people success for your organization. If you want to revisit any of these sessions or share the event with your network, which we hope that you do, the full event recording will be available on the People Success microsite. And don't forget to join us tomorrow and Thursday for focus sessions on DE&I and belonging, well-being, culture, and manager empowerment, and a chance to claim those special prizes. Thank you for joining, and see you tomorrow.